Ancient Egypt, land of the pyramids, mummies, and powerful pharaohs. We've all heard the famous stories, but what if I told you there are secrets that history books rarely mention? From bizarre medical practices to unsolved mysteries hidden beneath the sands, today we're uncovering the secrets of ancient Egypt nobody told you. But before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss fascinating stories from world history. The hidden purpose of the pyramids. When you think about ancient Egypt, the very first image that comes to mind is, of course, the pyramids of Giza. For centuries, we've been told that these massive stone structures were nothing more than tombs for the pharaohs. And yes, they did serve that purpose, but their meaning goes far beyond just being a final resting place. The pyramids were symbols of absolute power, designed not only to honor the pharaohs in death, but also to remind the living of their divine authority. Each pyramid was a bold statement. The king is not just a man, but a god on earth. Even more fascinating is how the pyramids were aligned. Recent research shows that the Great Pyramid of Khufu is perfectly aligned with the constellation Orion, believed by the Egyptians to represent Osiris, the god of rebirth and the afterlife. This means the pyramids were not just graves, but cosmic gateways, connecting the pharaoh's soul with the stars. Some scholars believe that the entire pyramid complex was designed as a sort of stairway to heaven, a way for the king's spirit to ascend into eternity. In other words, these giant monuments weren't just stone and sand. They were carefully crafted spiritual machines, bridging earth and the divine. So the next time you see a picture of the pyramids, remember, you're not just looking at a tomb. You're looking at an ancient key to immortality, built with secrets that still amaze us today. The mysterious labor force. When most people picture the construction of the Egyptian pyramids, they imagine a scene straight out of Hollywood. Thousands of slaves chained together, whipped by overseers, dragging enormous blocks of stone under the scorching desert sun. For decades, this image shaped our understanding of ancient Egypt. But in reality, that story is more myth than truth. Archaeologists working around the Giza Plateau have uncovered something remarkable: remains of a vast workers' village. This wasn't a prison camp. It was a bustling community with bakeries, breweries, and even medical facilities. The evidence paints a very different picture. The pyramids were built not by slaves, but by skilled laborers who were respected, cared for, and in many ways honored for their work. So who were these people? Many of them were ordinary farmers. Every year, when the Nile River flooded, their fields would be underwater for months. Instead of sitting idle, they traveled to Giza, where they could contribute to the massive construction projects. In exchange, they received food, beer, and shelter. This was a form of national service, but it was also an opportunity for steady wages and even social prestige. Now, let's talk about beer, because in ancient Egypt, beer wasn't just a drink. It was nutrition, currency, and culture all rolled into one. Workers were often paid in rations of bread and beer, and estimates suggest that each laborer could drink up to a gallon of beer per day. Far from being drunk all the time, this was their main source of calories, hydration, and essential nutrients. In other words, beer quite literally built the pyramids. What's truly fascinating is the organization of these workers. They weren't just random groups of peasants. Excavations show that they were divided into teams, each with specific responsibilities. Stone haulers, rope pullers, masons, and tool makers all played a crucial role. And like modern construction crews, they even had team names. Graffiti discovered inside the Great Pyramid includes inscriptions such as the Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Menkaure. These weren't forced slaves leaving desperate cries for help. They were proud builders marking their contribution with humor and pride. Even more surprising, the workers had access to health care. Skeletons found at the Giza Workers' Cemetery show signs of healed injuries, including broken bones that were set and cared for. This tells us that injured workers weren't simply abandoned. They were treated and allowed to continue their lives. For an ancient society, this level of care is extraordinary. So let's rethink the old story. Instead of a line of suffering slaves under the whip, imagine thousands of ordinary Egyptians, farmers, craftsmen, and builders, working in shifts, organized into teams, fueled by bread and beer, proud of their contribution to something far greater than themselves. The pyramids weren't just royal tombs. They were national projects, built by the collective effort of a society that believed they were creating monuments to eternity. The truth is, the pyramids weren't only about honoring a pharaoh. They were about uniting a civilization. Every stone lifted was a statement of identity, pride, and shared destiny. And that's why these monuments still stand today, because they were built not with chains and cruelty, but with skill, organization, and a vision that went far beyond one man's tomb. Strange medical practices. When we think about ancient medicine, it's easy to imagine primitive treatments and wild superstitions. And while that's partly true, the story of Egyptian medicine is far more complex. In fact, the Egyptians were surprisingly advanced for their time, and also, at times, shockingly bizarre. Let's start with what they got right. Ancient Egyptian doctors were some of the first in history to specialize. There were physicians who focused only on the eyes, dentists for teeth, and even experts in stomach or head injuries. This level of specialization is incredible for a civilization that flourished more than 3,000 years ago. One of their greatest medical tools was honey. Modern science has confirmed that honey has antibacterial properties, making it an effective treatment for wounds. The Egyptians frequently used honey to clean cuts and prevent infections. They also practiced setting broken bones with wooden splints, and they understood how to stitch up deep wounds. Some skeletal remains even show signs of amputations where the patient survived for years after the surgery, proof that their medical practices actually worked. But then, there's the stranger side. Not all their remedies were exactly scientific. For example, one of the most unusual contraceptives used in ancient Egypt was a mixture of crocodile dung and honey, inserted to prevent pregnancy. Yes, you heard that right, crocodile dung. While it sounds absurd to us today, it actually created an acidic environment that might have offered some level of protection. Still, I don't think anyone would want to try that method today. The Egyptians also believed strongly in the power of magic and religion as part of healing. Spells, amulets, and prayers were often prescribed alongside practical treatments. For them, illness wasn't just a physical problem, it was also a spiritual imbalance. To be healed, both body and spirit needed to be treated. Another curious fact is how much they knew about the human body. Thanks to the practice of mummification, Egyptian priests and embalmers had intimate knowledge of organs and anatomy. They learned, for instance, how the lungs, heart, and stomach were arranged. However, they still believed the brain was useless, just a filler. They thought the heart was the center of thought, emotion, and memory. That's why, during mummification, the brain was often discarded, but the heart was carefully preserved. Their medical texts, such as the Edwin Smith Papyrus and the Ebers Papyrus, contain hundreds of remedies and surgical instructions. Some of these are astonishingly rational, describing symptoms and treatments much like a modern medical textbook. Others, however, include recipes involving animal fat, blood, or even ground-up mummies used as medicine. Clearly, Egyptian medicine was a mix of brilliant observation, trial and error, and deep superstition. So, ancient Egyptian medicine leaves us with two powerful impressions. On one hand, they were pioneers, using honey as an antibiotic, setting bones, and recording medical knowledge in written form. On the other hand, some of their practices remind us just how strange and unpredictable human history can be. It's a reminder that progress doesn't happen in a straight line. It's a mixture of wisdom, experimentation, and sometimes very bizarre ideas.
The afterlife obsession. For the ancient Egyptians, death wasn't the end of life.
It was the beginning of an eternal journey. To them, the afterlife was not just a vague hope. It was a carefully planned destination, with maps, rules, and even trials to overcome. One of the most important texts guiding this journey was the Book of the Dead. It wasn't a single book, but a collection of spells and prayers written on papyrus meant to help the deceased navigate the challenges of the underworld. Imagine it as a kind of guidebook to eternity. The Egyptians believed that after death, a person's heart would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart was lighter or equal to the feather, the soul was allowed to enter the eternal paradise, known as the Field of Reeds. But if the heart was heavy with sin and lies, the soul faced a terrifying fate, being devoured by Ammit, a monster that was part crocodile, part lion, and part hippopotamus. To them, this was true annihilation, the end of existence. This obsession with the afterlife explains why mummification was so important. The body had to be preserved as a vessel for the soul, and the tomb had to be filled with everything the dead might need: food, tools, jewelry, and even servants in the form of Ushabti figurines. For the wealthy, tombs were miniature palaces designed to ensure comfort for eternity. So, when you look at Egyptian monuments, remember this: they weren't built for life, but for what came after. To the Egyptians, immortality wasn't a dream. It was a plan, carefully designed and written in stone. The hidden role of women. When we think about ancient civilizations, most of us imagine societies dominated entirely by men. But ancient Egypt was different. Compared to many of their contemporaries, Egyptian women enjoyed a level of freedom and influence that was truly remarkable. Women in Egypt could own property, inherit wealth, run businesses, and even divorce their husbands, rights that women in Greece or Rome centuries later often did not have. Some women even served as high priestesses, holding powerful religious roles that connected them directly to the gods. And of course, Egypt gave the world some of the most famous female rulers in history. Hatshepsut, one of the most successful pharaohs, expanded Egypt's wealth and influence through trade rather than war. Centuries later, Cleopatra VII would use her intelligence, diplomacy, and political skill to hold Egypt's throne during the rise of Rome. These were not symbolic figureheads. They were real leaders who shaped the destiny of their nation. Religion also elevated women. Goddesses like Isis, Hathor, and Sekhmet were central figures in Egyptian belief, representing motherhood, love, healing, and even war. In fact, Isis was so influential that her worship spread across the Mediterranean, lasting long after pharaonic Egypt had fallen. Everyday women, too, played essential roles. They managed households, raised children, and often worked alongside men in farming or craft production. Their contributions weren't hidden. They were respected as part of the foundation of society. So while ancient Egypt was not an equal society by modern standards, it offered women opportunities and recognition that were extraordinary for the ancient world. In many ways, Egyptian women lived lives that wouldn't be seen again until thousands of years later. Unsolved mysteries. Even after thousands of years of study, ancient Egypt still keeps many of its secrets. And some of these mysteries continue to puzzle historians and scientists to this very day. One of the biggest questions is, how were the pyramids built? Millions of limestone blocks, some weighing several tons, were transported and stacked with astonishing precision. Theories suggest the use of massive ramps, wooden sleds, or even water-lubricated sand to reduce friction. Yet no single explanation has been proven. The exact methods remain one of history's greatest construction mysteries. Another puzzle lies in their incredible skill at mummification. The Egyptians perfected techniques that could preserve bodies for thousands of years. Modern science is still studying the resins and chemicals they used, some of which remain unidentified. It's almost as if they had knowledge of preservation that we still can't fully replicate. And then there's the mystery of the lost labyrinth of Hawara, described by the ancient Greek historian Herodotus. He wrote of a massive underground complex with thousands of chambers, said to be more impressive than the pyramids themselves. Yet despite centuries of searching, no such labyrinth has ever been found. Finally, we can't forget the countless hidden chambers. Recent scans of the Great Pyramid have revealed anomalies, spaces that might be undiscovered rooms, sealed away for over 4,000 years. What lies inside them? Treasures, secrets, or simply empty voids? We don't yet know. These mysteries remind us that even with all our modern technology, ancient Egypt still holds secrets buried beneath its sands. And perhaps some of them were never meant to be found. For all its wonders of ancient Egypt. For all its wonders, ancient Egypt also had a darker, more unsettling side. Behind the glory of the pyramids and the brilliance of their culture, there were practices that today might seem disturbing. Take, for example, their obsession with magic and curses. Egyptians believed that spells could protect tombs and punish intruders. This is where the famous idea of the curse of the pharaohs comes from, a belief that anyone disturbing a burial site would suffer misfortune or even death. While many of these stories are exaggerated, they reflect how deeply fear and superstition were woven into Egyptian life. Another chilling aspect was the practice of animal sacrifice and mummification. Cats, ibises, crocodiles, and even baboons were killed and embalmed as offerings to the gods. Archaeologists have found vast underground catacombs filled with millions of animal mummies. These rituals show us a society where devotion to the divine sometimes meant large-scale killing. And then there's the brutal reality of power. Pharaohs were seen as divine, but that divinity was often enforced through absolute control. Dissent could mean punishment, exile, or worse. The grandeur of Egypt came at a cost, thousands of lives dedicated to ensuring the glory of one ruler. So while Egypt inspires awe with its achievements, we shouldn't forget that it was also a place of fear, superstition, and ruthless authority. A civilization of light, but also of shadows. From cosmic pyramids and bizarre medicine to powerful queens and unsolved mysteries, ancient Egypt remains one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history. It was a culture of extraordinary knowledge, deep spirituality, and yes, even strange and dark practices. But perhaps that's what makes it so endlessly captivating. It was a world both familiar and alien at the same time. So which of these secrets surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into history's greatest stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.